What yet, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Lycos, and this is my best start new player guide for No Man's Sky. This is actually a series of videos that I made over the last couple of months. I decided to put them together into one big video for anyone who wants an easier way to watch them back to back. I hope this video helps you out on your No Man's Sky journey. If you liked the video, it would be awesome if you'd hit that subscribe button. And now, let's get right into the guide. Now, when you start a new game in No Man's Sky, you're going to have a bunch of different options that you can choose from. Most people are going to go with a normal playthrough, so that's what we're going to be doing in this guide. But No Man's Sky has a huge amount of difficulty options to really allow you to customize your game any way that you like. So when you start off in a normal playthrough, the first planet that you're going to be on is going to be a little bit hazardous, nothing crazy, but recharging your hazard protection is going to be one of your main priorities. Now, the first thing that I recommend that you do is just start harvesting resources. You're mostly going to be using your multi-tool on stuff like rocks and plants in order to get ferrite dust and carbon when you're starting off. So now we're going to harvest up a bunch of these rocks so that we can get some ferrite dust to repair our scanner on our multi-tool. This is going to allow us to scan the area so that we can see different resources that are around. Right now we're looking for sodium, which shows up as this little yellow icon. So we're going to be getting these plants, which luckily are right next to us, and we've got a whole bunch that we can harvest. And this is one way that you can recharge your hazard protection. The game is going to prompt you to go in to your inventory, and then you can recharge it this way. You can also go to the quick menu, which is down on the D-pad on a controller, and then just choose this little battery icon, and then you can recharge any of your systems in this menu. Now, another way that you can recharge your hazard protection is just by getting some cover. If there's a cave nearby, which we did have this little area, I was actually surprised that this was enough of a cave in order to recharge my hazard protection, but surprisingly it was. So if you can find a cave nearby, you don't need to use any resources, you just go into the cave and then you'll automatically recharge your hazard protection. Now once we have this done, the game is going to be getting us to go to our ship. I recommend that on the way to the ship that you're harvesting up a few things that you see. From these little red flowers you can get oxygen. Oxygen we're going to need later on to recharge our life support. You can see how much hazard protection or life support you have left down in the left hand corner. It also gives you a little bit of information on the planet, such as the temperature. And then on the right hand side, the game is always going to be telling you exactly what you need to do for your particular mission that you're on. So keep in mind as you're playing the game, if you ever feel that you're lost, you don't know what to do, it's always going to tell you the next step for your mission down in the bottom right hand corner. Also, you'll notice that there's a couple of other little icons down in the bottom right hand corner. One of these is for your sprint, so as you're sprinting you're going to run out of stamina. And then the other one is for your jetpack, and same thing, you only have so much fuel when you use your jetpack and then you need to let it recharge. Both your sprint and your jetpack recharge when you're not using them. Now with my jetpack, you can see that I'm actually boosting around the planet to give myself some extra speed. If you want to do this, all you need to do is just walk forward, and then you're going to hit the melee button and then your boost at the same time. This boost is super useful for getting around the planet quickly. These plants that you see here, they're actually hazardous. They will actually explode and do a little bit of damage to you, but nothing serious. You can go up to the plant and actually harvest it to get some oxygen from it, and if you harvest it with your mining beam, you'll get more oxygen as well. Also keep an eye out for plants. You're going to want to harvest those along the way to get some carbon, and all of these resources will definitely come in handy later on. As you can see here, we've come across a little creature. This guy's pretty cute. Later on in the game, you can actually tame these guys. You can tame any creature that you find in the game and even ride them as well. Made sure that I took a little picture of this guy because I thought he was pretty cool looking. Maybe later on we'll come back and we'll tame this little guy. But for right now, we're just going to keep going and find our ship. So now we've found our ship. After activating the little machinery that's nearby in order to continue the quest, we're going to go over to these containers that are just underneath this flag. You'll find a bunch of resources in these containers. I recommend that you grab all of it. And whenever you see containers like this, it doesn't hurt to go up and get the resources that they have. Now, there's actually a container here that we can't access. You're going to need a certain pass, which we can get later on, but we do not have it just yet. We're also going to interact with the damaged machinery here. Damaged machinery are particularly good early on because you can get a little bit of nanites. Nanites are one of the currencies in the game, along with units, and as you can see here, quicksilver. But quicksilver is more of a special currency the main two currencies that you're going to be worried about, especially early on in the game, is the units and nanites. So now we're going to jump into our ship, and the game is going to tell us exactly what we need to do in order to repair our ship. As you can see here, we're going to need a couple of different items in order to repair the ship. Now the game again tells you exactly what you need to do. You just need to keep an eye on the bottom right hand corner, and anytime that you get to an important point in the mission, it's going to pop right up on your screen. You really need to be trying pretty hard in order to miss what you need to do next. Also, if you ever get confused, if you ever get lost, another thing that you can do is go into the menu, go over to your log, and this log will have a list of all of your current missions. So now we're going to make the metal plating in our inventory. There are tons of different items that you can craft in No Man's Sky, and a lot of them can be crafted right in your inventory. Now after progressing through another couple of steps, you're going to get this planetary chart. We're going to use the planetary chart, and that's going to tell us where we can get the Hermetic Seal. Now, as we're heading over to get the Hermetic Seal, you're going to notice that the game is going to tell you that there is an incoming storm. Now, these storms make it so that it can be pretty hard to see, and they also make it so that your hazard protection drains much more quickly. So the best thing to do when you get into one of these storms, at least early on in the game, is to find some shelter. So either find a cave, get into your ship, or in this case, we're actually heading towards some buildings. So we're just going to keep heading towards the icon, and then eventually we're going to get to a couple of small buildings, and we can go in there and get some shelter. So once we made it to the buildings, we're going to go inside and get our Hermetic Seal. So it's actually going to place our Hermetic Seal into your inventory. And now we're also going to have the blueprint. So later on, if we need a Hermetic Seal for anything, we're going to be able to craft it. So now we're just going to wait a little bit for the storm to pass by, and then we're going to head back to our ship. Now in order to find our ship, the game is going to tell us that we need to use our visor in order to find it, but we can't use it yet because it's actually broken. So we're going to need to repair our visor that's on our multi-tool. For that, we need a carbon nanotube, so we just need a little bit of carbon, and then we create the carbon nanotube in our inventory. Once we have our analysis visor, now we can actually scan a bunch of things that's on the planet. You can scan rocks, animals, and plants, and for everything that you scan, you're going to get a small amount of units, and then afterwards you can actually go into your Discoveries tab and upload those discoveries for nanites. And you can even rename all of your discoveries, and that includes systems and planets. Over there you can see that there is a giant building. That's actually a planetary archive. There's going to be a bunch of ships coming and going from that area. That's a place that I actually really like to build a base, which we'll get into later on in the series. But those are really cool buildings that we're definitely going to be checking out in the future. Now back at the ship, we're going to use our Hermetic Seal to finish repairing our engines. And then we're going to need to make dihydrogen jelly out of our dihydrogen crystals. Those were the little blue crystals that we've been harvesting along the way. And then we're going to need to make our refiner. This small refiner is very useful early on in the game. You can refine a ton of resources in No Man's Sky. You refine resources in order to make them into other resources. Later on you can get bigger refiners and then refine 2 resources into another resource. There's a whole bunch you can do with refiners, and you can also make a lot of units with these refiners as well. So now we have everything we need, our ship is completely repaired, and now we can take off and head out into space. So once you get out into space, again, keep an eye on that bottom right hand corner. The game is going to tell you a couple of different things that it wants you to do, pretty much just to get you used to flying the ship. You also notice that there's probably some asteroids around. If you shoot the asteroids, you'll get some resources from them. But right now, the game is going to prompt us to go to our next destination. So we're going to land back on the planet, and the game is going to get us to do my least favorite activity, probably most people's least favorite activity, in No Man's Sky. We're going to use our analysis visor again, and now we're going to be searching for a particular location. You can see that it will tell you exactly how many units, so that's how far you are from this destination that we're trying to get to. So we're just going to run towards this destination and then use our scanner from time to time to make sure that we're on the right track. So now we're at the location, we're going to automatically scan it. Now we're going to interact with this damaged machinery, and it's going to give us a couple of very useful blueprints. One is the terrain manipulator. So once we craft this terrain manipulator, we're going to be able to manipulate the terrain in different ways. You're going to be able to dig down underneath the ground. You can flatten out areas with the terrain manipulator. You can actually build up the ground with the terrain manipulator. So this is a very useful item. It's pretty useful for base building, and we're going to be using it quite a bit for mining resource deposits. There's a lot of uses for the terrain manipulator, and it will be a tool that you use quite often in No Man's Sky. And the game also gave us our blueprint so we can make the base computer, and that's going to allow us to claim the area and to be able to build our first base. So now, in order to build our base, we're going to gather up some copper, convert that into chromatic metal using our refiner, and then we can use that chromatic metal in order to build our base computer. The base computer is going to give us a whole bunch of blueprints for building our first base. Now, the first planet that the game is going to ask you to build a base on is not an ideal planet. It's probably not going to look exactly like you want, but that's okay because this is only your introduction to base building. Whenever I'm starting a new game, I pretty much build just a little shack for my first base, and I definitely recommend that you wait till later on in the game to get into base building. For starters, this early on in the game, you're not going to have much in the way of base building blueprints, so you're not going to be able to build much of a base now anyway. So later on in the game, once you progress further, you will be able to build a much more impressive base. So as you can see here, we've built the bare minimum base. Now I'm going to put down my refiner so that I can refine some necessary resources. So we're going to refine some pure ferrite into magnetized ferrite so that we can put down our construction research unit. This is going to allow you to research some blueprints. It's very limited this early on in the game, but later on we're going to be able to get an insane amount of building blueprints. The base building in No Man's Sky is definitely up there with my favorite base building in any game. So right now we're going to need some salvage data, and in order to get that we're going to need to find some buried technology. So you can find buried technology using your analysis visor, and once we find the icon we're going to mark it so that it will stay on our heads up display. So this is an item that we need to dig up using our terrain manipulator. There's quite a few hidden things that you can find buried underneath the ground on planets, and there are also many cave systems on planets as well with some pretty interesting and valuable things in them. But right now we're going to grab up a little bit of salvage data. I'm probably going to only find a couple of these buried technologies, but if you're really into base building and you want to get a lot of blueprints, you're going to need a ton of this salvage data. But that's not something I'm going to worry about right now. Now back at our little base, we can use the salvage data to grab some blueprints. But while we're here, another tip that I have for new players is that you experiment with your refiner. All the different things that you've been collecting throughout your playthrough, I'd put them into the refiner to see if we can make something else out of them. You can get some really useful things by experimenting like this with your refiner. For instance, we can take the living slime, and that converts into runaway mold, and then you can refine runaway mold into nanites. So don't forget to experiment with your refiner. You can find some really useful things. So now let's use our salvage data to grab our base teleporter and the biofuel reactor. Also, we need to grab the wires, which doesn't cost any salvage data at all. And then you'll notice down below that we have the solar panel and the battery. We're going to be using the biofuel reactor for now to power our teleporter, but the solar panel and the battery are excellent for power when you're doing a lot of base building. You can also pop through the tabs here to see what other kind of blueprints that you can get, but base building is definitely something I'm going to be getting into later on in the series. And as I said, this is only a very small amount of the base building blueprints that you're going to be able to get later on. So now we're going to build our teleporter and our biofuel reactor. It takes very basic materials in order to build these two things. And then we're going to go in and select our wire and make sure that we connect our ball fuel reactor to our teleporter. If you want, you can actually turn off base power in your settings, and then everything that's in your base will automatically get power, and then you won't have to worry about building anything like ball fuel reactors to power anything in your base. The ball fuel reactor is also very simple to power. You just need to put a bit of carbon in there, and with just a little bit of carbon, it lasts quite a long time. Now, with teleporters, you're going to need a teleporter to teleport away from your base, but with any of your bases that you build, you can actually teleport to them anytime you want without even having a teleporter there. Just remember that if you want to teleport away from your base, you're going to need a teleporter. Now that we have all of this done, the game is going to send us to our first space station. Now we're going to head into the space station. I'll give you a bit of a tour of the space station and show you some of the more useful things that you're going to want to know. So besides your ship, you're going to see other ships coming and going from the space station. You can actually buy things from the pilots that are coming in, and you can also purchase their ships as well. But now let's go check out the rest of the space station. So up top here we have our technology merchants. These are very important NPCs that you're going to be able to buy upgrades from for your ship, your exosuit, your exocrafts, and your multi-tool. Right now, since we're playing through the game's tutorial, they're going to get us to talk to a few NPCs first. It's also going to send you over to get an inventory slot for your exosuit. You can only purchase one inventory slot here, but for every space station you visit, you can get a new inventory slot. It's very important in No Man's Sky to have as much inventory as you can get, because you will notice that you're collecting a lot of stuff in this game. Now, here we have the technology merchant for your exosuit. As you can see, they sell a whole bunch of different upgrades that you can get. These impact stuff like your life support, your movement module, which is your jetpack, your shield, and protection modules as well, so you can get protection from cold, thermal, radiation, stuff like that. Early on for the exosuit, I like to get movement modules because they allow you to travel around using your jetpack a lot more efficiently. Right across from this is the multi-tool technology merchant, and you can actually upgrade your multi-tools here and buy upgrades from the technology merchant, same as you can with the exosuit upgrades. And then right on the side of the technology merchant for your multi-tool, you'll find that there is a multi-tool here that you can buy. There are also technology merchants here for both your ship and your exocraft vehicles, but right now we don't have much in the way of nanites, so we're not going to be able to buy any upgrades just yet. Now down on the lower level you have the teleporter, so you can use the teleporter to teleport back to your bases that you've built and other stations that you visited. Right across from this we have the galactic trade, where you can buy and sell items. Right in the back of the space station you're going to find the starship outfitter. Here you can upgrade your ship and you can scrap it as well. You can actually scrap ships and get a bunch of components from them that you can sell on the galactic trade, or you can scrap ships to get parts to make your own custom ship. Speaking of custom ships, right next to the starship outfitter is the ship fabricator, which, as I said, you can use to make your own custom ship. We will definitely be checking out this later on in the series once we have some ship parts. And then right next to this we have the character customization. I'm just going to go with a very simple classic look, but I'm sure we'll be back here customizing our character again later on. Now that is most of the important things that you're going to need to know about the space station early on in your playthrough, and now the game is going to get us to use the teleporter to teleport back to our base. I'm going to pick up my refiner just to make sure that I don't forget it on the planet. So on our way to our next destination, I've seen that there's actually a planetary archive that's very close to my base. If I had known that the planetary archive was there, I would have built my base right at the planetary archive. Planetary archives and trading outposts are some of my favorite places to build a base, because you're constantly going to see ships coming and going, and it's a very good place to hunt for new ships. Now, arriving at our next destination, the game is going to give us our warp drive, so we're going to need to get the resources in order to be able to build this. I already have the chromatic metal that I need. If you don't, then you're going to need to find another copper deposit, but getting the microprocessors is going to be a little bit more of a task. You're going to need to buy these from the galactic trade, so we're going to need to get quite a few units in order to get them. So this early on in the game, on this particular planet, There are two different things that I'm going to be looking for in order to get units to buy the microprocessors. Number one, we can just get salvage data because it's only going to take 2 or 3 salvage data and we'll have enough. But there are also relics on this planet in caves, so I'm also going to grab a few of those as well. So now that I've collected up a few of these relics that I found in the cave, which happen to be vortex cubes, and gone around and got some more salvage data, I'm going to use my teleporter at my base to go back to the space station and then buy the microprocessors that I need from the galactic trade. Now that we have our warp engines, we're going to need to head out and get some fuel. So the game is going to direct us straight to where we need to go in order to get the blueprint for the fuel, which are called warp cells. But there's also another really great thing about this building. Once you land and go up to the building, you'll notice that there's little purple eggs. There are tons of them, and you're going to be able to use your multi-tool on them in order to harvest them. Once you use your multi-tool on them, you'll see that there's a little ball that's going to pop out. You can go over and pick that ball up. This is actually a larval core, and it's worth a lot of units. Now there are going to be some hostile creatures that are going to pop out of the ground and try to attack you, but as long as you keep moving, they're going to have a really hard time hitting you. And if you want to be extra careful, once you grab a couple, you can actually fly up to the top of the building. Now they can still shoot things at you, but they don't do too much damage. So if you just keep moving around the building, you shouldn't have too much trouble, and I would recommend that you gather up all of the larval cores. So I've gathered up all of the larval cores, then I'm just going to head inside to grab the warp cell blueprint, and that's the fuel that we're going to need in order to recharge our warp engine. So we need to make our antimatter, then our antimatter housing, and then we combine the two of them together into a warp cell. Now, as I said, these larval cores are worth a ton of units, so you can sell them at the galactic trade, but you can also put them into your refiner and refine them into nanites. So now we're all ready to go to the galactic map and warp to our next system. Now once you get to your second system, the game isn't going to get you to do a whole lot in this system. It's just going to get you to go visit an alien structure. It's going to give you a little bit of lore and another warp cell so you can warp to another system. Now I made sure to visit the space station in this system. I didn't do anything in there, I just wanted to land on the space station so that I'm able to teleport back here again later on. And it doesn't hurt to grab the extra inventory slot here as well. I didn't think about it while I was here, so I'm going to have to teleport back and get it later on. But for right now, I'm going to continue on with the tutorial and head to the next system. Now in this system, things are going to get a little more interesting. Right from the start, the story is going to send you to a crashed ship. There we're going to get our advanced mining beam, and we can also repair this crashed ship. Now you can get this ship for yourself if you want and repair all of the systems, but that takes a little bit too much time for my liking, so unless a crashed ship that I find is absolutely amazing and I definitely want to keep it, I'm not going to bother holding on to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to repair the engines and the thrusters, so that I can get it off the ground and up to a space station. Then once at the space station, I can scrap it for its parts and make a little bit of money selling these components to the galactic trade. And I'm also going to sell the upgrade that I got from it to a technology merchant for extra nanites. Now the system that I warped to happens to be an outlaw system. There's a lot of pretty cool things that you can do with the outlaw systems. As you can see, the space stations are quite a bit different. You can even get some outlaw missions here, which are pretty cool. So now we're just going to head back out into space and continue on with the story. Out here we're going to be alerted again, and then we're going to answer the communication, and this is going to lead us to one of the most important things in No Man's Sky, and that is the Anomaly. There is quite a bit of important stuff that we're going to be going over with regards to the Anomaly, but first let's finish up the tutorial. So we're going to need to go talk to Nada, and Nada's going to send us to talk to a bunch of other NPCs. We're going to have a chat with Polo. We're going to talk to this NPC down here. This is an NPC that you can give data to, and he will give you nanites in return. Same thing with this other NPC that's very close by. You can transmit your milestone data to them, and they will give you nanites for this as well. And continuing on here, the game is going to get you to go to one of the most important locations in the game. That's this area right here on the Anomaly. And here you can get some very useful upgrades and unlock a ton of building blueprints. In my opinion, this is the best location to spend your first nanites. There's some really great and in some cases crucial upgrades that you can get in this spot. Now the first NPC that the game is going to get you to go to is this one here that you can buy exosuit upgrades off of. The personal refiner is really great. The movement upgrades are very good as well. Also, right next to this vendor, you can get another inventory slot. So in the last video, we got the inventory slot, which was on the space station, but you can also get one on the Anomaly for every system that you visit. So if you want to maximize your inventory, make sure that you're visiting both for every system that you visit. Now, right next to this spot is the construction research station, where you can purchase an incredible amount of building blueprints. The medium refiner is useful early on, and this is also where you can get the exocraft summoning stations. Right next to that we have the NPC that has ship upgrades. Now here early on, I really like to get the economy scanner. You need to get the teleport receiver first, which is another good one. It allows you to transfer items to your ship from a greater distance. But I particularly like the economy scanner. This does a couple of things, but the thing that I like the best about this is that you can scan from space and see where trading outposts are in that system. There's also a bunch of other really good upgrades here for your ship. The cadmium, emerald, and indium drives allow you to travel to new systems. There's some good upgrades for your thrusters, and some really great ship weapons. I particularly like the infra knife, but the positron ejector is really good as well. Over on this side we have the NPC where we can get multi-tool upgrades. You can also purchase a multi-tool here as well. I personally really like the scatter blaster and the pulse spitter weapons. The pulse spitter is probably my favorite, but the scatter blaster is a really powerful shotgun. But this is a very important area that you should be returning to pretty often. Get your upgrades and building blueprints. And now we're just going to talk to Nada one more time, and this is pretty much where the game's tutorial ends. You can still continue on with the story, but the game really opens up at this point, and you can check out pretty much everything that No Man's Sky has to offer. Now back down where we first came into the Anomaly, there's the Nexus. This is where you can get multiplayer missions. You can complete these solo or with your friends, or you can wait to see if a random player joins your group. There's a lot of good rewards for these missions, and you can also do missions here for Quicksilver. This is a special currency that's in the game, and if we just head over to the side of the Nexus, you'll see an NPC where we can buy things for Quicksilver. This guy sells a ton of really cool things for Quicksilver, and if you play any of the expeditions, you can get your expedition rewards here as well. Now, speaking of expeditions, there is a really cool expedition that's going on right now. So if you're watching this video shortly after it's released, if you haven't checked out the expedition yet, I highly recommend it. I really enjoy doing the expeditions in No Man's Sky, and they give some really great rewards. And even if you're a new player, if you're at the point where you've reached the Anomaly, this would be a great time to check out an expedition. Now, there isn't always an expedition on the go, so if you're watching this video a couple of months after I released it, you may not have an option for an expedition. But right now, while the expedition is going on, you can either start a new game and do the expedition that way, or you can play the expedition in your current save just by going to this location right next to the Nexus. This terminal will allow you to do the expedition on your current character. While you're doing the expedition, you will temporarily lose your ship's inventory, stuff like that, but as soon as you're done the expedition, you'll get all of that back and get to keep all of the things that you earned in the expedition. If you're watching this video within a few days of its release, there's an expedition on right now with some really amazing rewards that I highly recommend that you check out. But before checking out the expedition, I would recommend that you play No Man's Sky for a little while. Once you feel like you got the basics down, then you can check out the expedition. But whenever you're watching this video, just keep in mind if there's an expedition on the go, you'll always get some really amazing rewards from playing an expedition. Now, the first thing that I like to do before I get out there and start exploring is I like to go to the Anomaly and pick up a bunch of blueprints for upgrades that I know that are going to be useful early on in the game. For our exosuit, we're going to grab the hazmat gauntlets and the personal refiner. This allows us to refine resources on our character, which is very handy, and we're going to install it right onto our exosuit. I'm going to grab the medium refiner in the base blueprints, and I'm also going to grab the Minotaur mech. For the ship, we want to grab the teleport receiver and the economy scanner, and that should be most of what we're going to need for now. Now, if you want to know where I got the Nanites to be able to pick up all these upgrades, we're going to be using the larval cores that we got in the last episode, and then you can just throw these into your refiner and they will refine into nanites. Now, to get the materials that we need in order to install these upgrades, I'm just going to drop by a space station, and usually we can find everything that we need in order to install these particular upgrades, either in the galactic trade or from the pilots that are flying in and out of the space station. There's also a couple things like the ion batteries, which we can craft ourselves. All the blueprints that we picked up so far have pretty basic and easy to find resources in order to build them. Now, so far in my explorations, I've only landed on a couple of different planets, but I was lucky that one of those planets is actually a storm planet. So there are some planets out there that have extreme storms on them. It's pretty difficult to survive on these planets when the storm is going on, but these planets also have storm crystals, which early on are amazing to farm in order to make a ton of units. Now, in order to be able to gather these storm crystals, you're going to need either the hazmat gauntlets installed onto your exosuit, or the way that I prefer to farm these storm crystals is to get yourself a Minotaur mech, which has built-in hazard protection, so that no matter what the hazard is on the planet, you will be completely safe in your mech. You can also travel around super quickly using the boost of the mech, and the Minotaur can pick up the storm crystals for you. If you can find yourself a planet with these storm crystals, it is an extremely good way to make some early game units. As I said, you can do this without the Minotaur, but it's not quite as safe and it's not quite as fun. Now, one thing that I like to do when I'm out exploring is if I find an interesting or useful planet, I always build a little outpost on that planet. For instance, this planet with the storm crystals, I'm just building a little outpost with a teleporter and my Minotaur mech summoning station. Now, when I'm making units early on in No Man's Sky, I like to do it as I'm exploring and experiencing other aspects of the game. I like to explore a lot when I first start No Man's Sky, and by getting a scanner upgrade or two, when we use our scanner to scan things like rocks or plants or animals, you will be getting a lot more units. This is a great way to explore and get a ton of units at the same time. Another thing that I like to look for are these golden icons with the stars in them. Sometimes they'll have 2 stars, sometimes they'll have 3, and usually these are going to be things that you can gather that are worth a lot of units. I was able to find some gravitino balls on one planet which are worth a very good amount of units, and I found these floating crystals which when harvested give some very valuable resources. Now, one way to make a ton of units that's a little bit different and a little more action oriented is to go to outlaw systems and attack freighter convoys. There are freighters that have containers attached to them, and when you destroy them, you get some pretty good resources. Some of them are worth a ton of units. Now by doing this, you are going to lose reputation with whoever owned those freighters, but you will also gain reputation with the outlaws. Early on in the game, it's not a huge deal that you lose some reputation because you can always gain that back later on. But it's up to you. If you want to be an outlaw, this is a great way to make a ton of units. Now after I sold the storm crystals and the other resources that I got, I managed to get nearly 16 million units. I only farmed storm crystals 2 different times, so if you stay on one of these planets farming storm crystals, you can get a crazy amount of units. But right now I'm going to take these units and try to find myself my first S-Class ship. Now one of the ways that I like to hunt down S-Class ships is I'll go to a trading outpost. So earlier on we got an economy scanner, and once we have that installed on our ship, we can use it out in space and it will show us where a trading outpost is. So then you can just head down to the trading outpost, land, and watch the ships come and go. At trading outposts, there are tons of ships coming and going all of the time. So while I'm exploring different systems, I like to go to trading outposts from time to time, just hang out there and see what types of ships are coming in. Here I'm in an outlaw system, which is the best system for getting S-Class ships. You have a higher chance of getting S-Class ships in outlaw systems. Another reason that I really like to hunt ships in outlaw systems is that there are many more solar ships in outlaw systems. You're going to see solar ships all of the time, and solar ships are one of my favorite types of ships. I have a couple of solar ships on every one of my main playthroughs. And now that we can make custom solar ships, I like finding these even more. Now I didn't manage to find any S-Class solar ships, but I think I might just try and find some cheap ones with some cool parts to make a custom solar ship. I didn't find any S-Class solar ships, but I did manage to find a pretty cool S-Class fighter. Now this is not exactly the ship that I was looking for, but it's a pretty cool fighter, and it will do as my first S-Class ship. So I decided to take our new fighter out, do some more exploration, mainly because I want to find curious deposits so I can farm nanites, and also because I'm looking for a really amazing planet where we can build our first proper base. Now the way that you can find your own curious deposits, these are on many different types of planets. So early on in the game, while I'm exploring, I always use my analysis visor to look for these icons here, these golden type of icons with stars in them. We're looking for one that has 3 stars. These golden icons with the stars in them are always going to lead you to a resource that's really good, but of course we're hoping to get lucky and find ourselves a curious deposit. I happened to get really lucky in this playthrough, and I found it early on, but sometimes it will take exploring quite a few planets in order to find one of these. Now once you find one curious deposit, that means that there's going to be a lot more on that planet. So what you want to do in order to farm these for nanites, first of all you want to put a little outpost down next to the curious deposit. I always like to put a medium refiner or 2 at the outpost, and a teleporter. Then I'm going to harvest the curious deposits. We're going to get runaway mold, and we can put this in our medium refiners to refine it into nanites. You're going to get a ton of nanites by doing this. Right now I'm going to put it into my portable refiner, and then I'm going to travel around the planet and try and find another good curious deposit. So now we're going to find ourselves another good curious deposit and build another outpost again with medium refiners and a teleporter. Now this is how I do it in order to get a ton of nanites. You're going to harvest the curious deposits with your multi-tool and then put the runaway mold into your medium refiners. After that you're going to use your teleporter to teleport back to the first base, and you will find that the curious deposits have respawned. So you can teleport back and forth, continuously harvesting the curious deposits and putting the runaway mold into your medium refiners. It won't take you long before you have thousands and thousands of runaway mold being refined into nanites, and this is one of the fastest ways to farm nanites in No Man's Sky. Now of course, this can get a little bit boring, but because we've made outposts, we can come back and do it whenever we want. So as soon as you get tired of farming up nanites, you can head out, explore, and then because we have the outposts here, we can pop back whenever we want to farm up some more nanites. Now also in this video, I want to show you guys how you can make your own custom ships. In a previous video, I showed you where you can do this on the space station, but in order to make your own custom ship, first you're going to need 3 parts. So you're going to need 3 ships to scrap to get those 3 parts in order to build your own custom ship. We're also going to need another key component which we can get on the space stations themselves. But we're going to need a lot of nanites in order to get this. Luckily we found the curious deposits, so we're going to be able to get as many nanites as we want. And we're also going to need millions of units in order to buy the ships that we need for the ship parts. I use a teleporter to teleport back to the outpost that I made on the storm planet where I can get storm crystals. As I said in the other videos, I always make sure to make an outpost on interesting planets or planets where I can get some really good resources like these storm crystals where I can make a ton of units. And it's never a bad idea to actually put custom names on these outposts, so later on after you've been playing for a while, you'll still know why you put that outpost there. So I went back and used my Minotaur again to farm up a whole bunch of storm crystals, just like we did in the previous video, but this time I farmed up even more. I sold the storm crystals for over 40 million units, which is more than we're going to need for this. And now we're going to need to find and buy 3 solar ships with parts that we want to have on our ship. And as in the last video, the best way that I like to do this is at a trading outpost. I'm going to head back to the same outpost where I got my S-Class fighter because I want to customize a solar ship, and Outlaw Systems is the best place to find solar ships. Now we're looking for the cheapest ships that we can find that have the parts that we're looking for. So I'm just going to hang out here, watch the solar ships come and go. There are several different cockpits that I really like for the solar ships. There's actually 2 different ones that's flying into this particular trading outpost that I really like. I think I'm going to go with this cockpit right here. So I think I'm also going to go with the wings that are on this one. And these solar cells are my favorite. So I found 3 different ships. Each one of them only costs just over 4 million. So that's pretty good. And when I was hanging out at the trading outpost looking for solar ships, there was actually several different S-Class ships that came in because, as I said before, Outlaw Systems are the best place to look for S-Class ships. You're going to see a lot more S-Class ships in Outlaw Systems. And I actually saw an S-Class solar ship come in, so I had to buy it, even though we were going to make our own solar ship. And I saw a couple other really cool fighters that came in that were S-Class as well. So now that we have 3 solar ships with the parts that we want, we're going to go up to a space station and scrap them for their parts. So at the Starship Outfitting Station, you can go in and scrap the ship, and then you can pick which part you're going to get from that ship. That's why we need 3 different ships, because we can only pick 1 part from each ship. Now before we're able to finalize our ship, we actually need to get a reactor to put into the ship. You can get C-Class, B-Class, A-Class, and S-Class reactors. You can buy this from the ship's technology merchant that's on the space stations. But as you can see here, to get an S-Class, it's going to cost you a lot of nanites. Of course, with the curious deposits, we can get 11,000 nanites and even more fairly quickly. So once we have our reactor, we're going to head to the Starship Fabricator and make our custom ship using the 3 parts that we have from salvaging the other ships and the reactor that we just bought. Then we can choose the color of our ship. Now this is not the most affordable or easiest way to get a ship in No Man's Sky by any means, but I love making my own custom ship so that I can get the exact look that I want. Alright, so this is the ship I put together. I think it looks pretty cool. And remember guys, you can also make custom ships out of fighters, haulers, and explorers. And hopefully in the near future we'll even be able to make custom Sentinel ships. So far we've gotten a couple really awesome ships, but right now we're going to go get one of the best and coolest looking ships in the game. We're going to be hunting for a Sentinel ship, And in the process, we're going to be getting some really good upgrades to make us much better at combat. So starting off, we're going to want to get ourselves a few different upgrades. So we're going to go to the Anomaly first and purchase some blueprints for some upgrades. Our main focus is getting a good weapon for our multi-tool. I'm going to be picking the Pulse Spitter because that's my personal favorite, but there are other really good weapons that you can choose from, such as the Scatter Blaster, which is a shotgun for your multi-tool, which is an incredibly powerful weapon as well. The Pulse Spitter is more of a rapid fire weapon, which is definitely more my style. Now we're going to head over to a space station. I'm going to pick up a new multi-tool because the one that we start with is not great. It doesn't have much in the way of space in order to install the upgrades that we're going to want to install. So I found this multi-tool on a space station. It's a decent multi-tool, nothing amazing, but it's definitely more than sufficient for what we're going to need it for. You can get multi-tools that are much more powerful than this one, but even with this multi-tool, once we have our upgrades installed, it'll be powerful enough to take on any threat in the game. So now we're just going to install our Pulse Spitter and the other upgrade blueprints that we picked up on the Anomaly. All of these upgrades take pretty basic materials. I'm going to buy most of them off of either the Galactic Trade or pilots that are on the space stations. The only thing that I wasn't able to buy was the deuterium, but this was actually pretty easy to get because you can refine tritium and dihydrogen into deuterium using a medium refiner. So we're going to install all of these upgrades, and then we're going to get more upgrades on the space station from the technology vendors. I'm going to buy 3 S-Class upgrades for the Pulse Spitter, and we're going to install that onto our multi-tool as well. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you're installing any upgrades is that you want to install upgrades of the same type next to each other. So for instance, if you have upgrades that are enhancing your Pulse Spitter, you want to place them next to each other or next to the Pulse Spitter. This will actually give your upgrades a bonus, and you will know when they have a bonus because there will be an outline around the upgrade. And from the Exosuit technology vendor, I'm also going to buy 3 S-Class shield upgrades. For these kind of upgrades that you get from the technology vendors, make sure that you don't install any more than 3, because if you install any more than 3, it will actually break all of your upgrades of that type. Now this is probably overkill, but I was able to farm a lot of nanites from the curious deposits in the last video, so we've got lots of nanites to spare, and once we have these upgrades, we're going to be prepared for any sort of combat in the game. Next up, we're going to need to find ourselves a dissonance system. That's where you're going to find your Sentinel ships. These are pretty common. You're just going to look on your galactic map, and you'll see in the description of the system whether it's a dissonant system or not. So we're going to warp there, and then once we get into the system, we're going to be looking for a planet that says dissonance detected. Now here, we're going to be looking for Sentinels. Specifically, we want to be looking for these types of Sentinels here. You can actually fly around your ship and find these pretty easily. Once you attack them, you're going to get the attention of other corrupted Sentinels. Now the reason why we got so many combat upgrades is so that we can take on these Sentinels. You can run away from these guys and escape them pretty easily, but you can also take on wave after wave if you want. And if you finish all of the waves, the game will show you where you can find a crashed Sentinel ship. But we're going to be using a different method to find our Sentinel ship. We're mostly just going to be searching for these kind of Sentinels here. We're going to farm these guys to get the mirrors that they drop, but most importantly, we're looking for a rare drop, which is an Echolocator. Finding the Echolocator is the best way to find Sentinel ships in my opinion, because it allows you to farm the Sentinel ships over and over again. And also, as a new player, we're going to be able to get a few extra things as well. Now we're going to activate the Echolocator, and it's going to send us to a location of a little camp. There we're going to find a terminal. If you interact with that terminal, you're going to have to do a little puzzle. But once that's done, you can do 2 different things. You can unlock the multi-tool case that's nearby. These can contain an excellent multi-tool. If you can get one of these as an S-Class multi-tool, they're some of the most powerful multi-tools in the game. Unfortunately, I got a C-Class here, but if you can get a higher class multi-tool, this is an excellent multi-tool. You need to repair the multi-tool, but you're only going to need stuff that you can find on these types of planets, so they're actually pretty easy to repair. Now, the other thing that we can do at the terminal is to locate a dissonant spike, and that's going to show you exactly where you can find a crashed Sentinel ship. Oh, and since this is our first time activating one of these terminals, we're also going to get a really cool cosmetic skin for our jetpack. Now before I leave here, I'm going to put down a base. This will actually allow us to farm Sentinel ships on this planet, because after we get our first Sentinel ship, we can come back here, use the terminal again to find another Sentinel ship. So once I put down a little outpost with a teleporter, then we're going to jump into our ship and head over to the crashed Sentinel ship. So now that we've made it to our crashed Sentinel ship, this is actually a pretty rare one to find. It's the most basic Sentinel ship that you can find. I kinda like this one, but I will admit that it's definitely not as cool as most of the Sentinel ships. Chances are the Sentinel ship that you will find will be bigger and will look quite a bit more impressive than this one. But for now, we're going to take what we can get and repair this Sentinel ship. There's going to be a few things that we can take off of the ship. The most important thing for right now is the brain. And in order to repair the ship, we're going to need the mirrors that we got earlier. We're also going to need radiant shards, which can be found all over the planet. And then we're going to need to use the brain in order to get the last piece that we need. So we're just going to fly over there, get the brain that we need, come back, and then we can use all of the items to repair our ship. And if you really like the look of your Sentinel ship, you can actually go back to the outpost that we made at that little camp, use the terminal again, and then find another one of these ships. Now, every ship that you find on this planet is going to look the same as the first one that you found. There's only one type of Sentinel ship per system. So if you want to find a different looking Sentinel ship, you're going to need to go to another system. But if you really like the look of the Sentinel ship and you want to try and farm it for a little while in order to get a higher class, just head back to the camp and you can keep farming these for a while. Now, another reason to farm these ships is that if we don't want to keep them, we can actually just head up to a space station and then scrap them to get components worth a lot of units. All of these Sentinel ships, the components in them are worth a ton of units. So farming these Sentinel ships, not only are you finding some of the best performing and best looking ships in the game, but then you can also scrap the ones that you don't want for a ton of units. Before you know it, you're going to have hundreds of millions of units just from farming Sentinel ships. Next up, let's get into some action. Right now we're in a freighter battle, just about to get our first freighter. Later on we're going to turn an S-Class Sentinel ship into an amazing combat ship, and hopefully we finally find an amazing planet so we can start one of my favorite things in No Man's Sky, which is base building. So as I fight off these pirates here, I'm going to give you some info on how to find your first freighter. You need to be playing No Man's Sky for 3 hours and you need to warp 5 times. As soon as you warp that 5th time, you're going to find yourself in a freighter battle just like the one that I've run into here. You're going to need to take out the pirates that are attacking the freighter, and the freighter captain will contact you and you will be able to get your first freighter for free. Now I'm just going to take this first freighter because later on we're going to get ourselves a dreadnought freighter. The pirate dreadnoughts are my favorite capital ships in the game, and they're actually pretty easy to get, which you'll see later on in this video. You can do a lot of really cool things with freighters. You can do a ton of base building on freighters. You can warp from system to system using your freighter. You can recruit frigates and send them out on expeditions, and they'll bring back a bunch of rewards for you. You can customize the freighters in different ways. You can customize the color of the engines, the color of the hull, and unlock a bunch of useful building blueprints for your freighter as well. Freighters are very useful and a ton of fun. So we got our first freighter, and now we're going to mod our first combat ship. Right now I want to take one of the Sentinels that I found from the Sentinel farming that I showed in my last video. Eventually, while I was farming Sentinel ships, I got lucky and found this S-Class Sentinel ship that has supercharged slots pretty close together, so it's a very good find, and it's going to make a great combat ship. we're going to be installing the Infraknife ship weapon, which is my favorite ship weapon in No Man's Sky. It does a ton of damage, both to shields and the hull, and when fully upgraded, it does a crazy amount of damage. We're going to get some S-Class upgrades on space stations. The S-Class upgrades that you can just buy on the space station is the fastest and easiest way to get some of the best upgrades in the game. And if you get yourself 3 S-Class upgrades for the Infraknife, you will be able to take down any ship that you find with ease. So usually what I do when I'm upgrading one of my ships, I'll be going from space station to space station to find S-Class upgrades. And then when I find a good S-Class upgrade, for instance, like I'm looking for the Infraknife S-Class upgrade right now, once I find one of those upgrades, I'm going to buy it, and then I'm going to jump into my ship, jump out to create a restore point, and then I'm going to reload the restore point. This way I will keep the S-Class upgrade that I just bought, and then I will be able to buy that same S-Class upgrade from the vendor again. This is the fastest way to get multiple of the same upgrade. I was also looking for some S-Class shield upgrades, but as I was traveling around trying to find some S-Class shield upgrades, I went to an outlaw system and ran into my first freighter battle where a pirate dreadnought is taking on another capital ship. Now you can run into these in any system that you go to, but you're more likely to run into them in the outlaw systems. But this is the freighter that I want to get, and we can actually get it for free. First, we need to make sure that we go underneath the shields on the back of the ship and take out the ship's engines. Then we're going to go up to the top of the ship. There are a bunch of huge cannons that are firing from the top of the ship. We need to take out each one of these cannons. Our Infraknife ship weapon is making short work of these guns, and once we have all of the guns taken out, the dreadnought will surrender to us. Then we can go in and talk to the captain of the dreadnought, and then we will be able to get it for free for our own ship. Now actually, as I was in this freighter battle, I received an emergency broadcast. This is another thing that as you're progressing the game, you're guaranteed to run into this. And when you get that emergency broadcast, when you investigate, you will find a settlement, and you will actually be able to take control of that settlement. Now, settlements are a whole other thing in themselves. It kind of has a bit of a Sims feel to it, where you'll be making a bunch of different decisions for your settlement, whether or not to build certain buildings in your settlement. You'll be tasked with settling disputes between settlers, and a whole bunch of other little tasks as you're progressing your settlement into a prosperous community. Now, the planet that my settlement is on also happens to be a pretty nice planet, and I think this is where I'm going to build my first proper base. Now, you can't actually put down a base computer in your settlement, but you can actually go just outside of the settlement, put down your base computer, and that will give you a big enough area that you can actually build into your settlement. This is a thing that I've done a few different times in No Man's Sky, and it's pretty cool because you can actually build your settlement into a huge city. First off, we're going to be going to the Anomaly to pick up a whole bunch of building blueprints. The vast majority of your building blueprints can be bought here on the Anomaly for salvage data, and you can also get some really cool building blueprints at the Quicksilver vendor as well. But I picked up the majority of blueprints that you can get here on the Anomaly, so that I can give you a really good idea of the amazing things that you can build in No Man's Sky. Now we're going to start building back at our settlement. If you're wondering how I was able to place down my base computer at the settlement, you can't put your base computer down in the middle of your settlement, but if you go a ways outside, you can place your base computer down and then you can build all the way into the settlement. I think this spot is pretty cool. I've got plenty of flat space just outside the settlement. Now, to give you just a taste of some of the things that you can build, I've built 3 different little houses here using 3 different building types. But I do think it's pretty cool that we can build a bunch of little houses all throughout our settlement to turn it into a much larger town. And there are tons of decorations that you can get to make your buildings look even better. I really like to build and decorate these little houses to expand my settlements and to give them a little more character. Right now I want to show you guys a really quick and easy way to build in No Man's Sky in order to make a huge base that looks amazing using the prefabs. It's a really cool and fast way to make a huge classic looking space outpost These kinds of bases really have a great classic sci-fi look to them. I love building with these prefabs and then connecting them together using the hallways, placing down some landing pads for my ship. I like using a lot of glass, especially if the base has a really good view. You can really quickly build a huge and amazing looking complex using the prefabs in No Man's Sky. So this is the base that I managed to put together. I put it together fairly quickly, but I really like the look of this one. You can get very creative with this kind of base building and build some amazing bases. Now of course you are going to need quite a few materials, but the materials that you need are usually pretty basic. Now as for the glass, there is a blueprint that you can get to be able to make glass, but a much easier way of getting a ton of glass is to just have a refiner. You're going to need some silicate powder, which is probably the easiest resource to get in No Man's Sky. Put that into the refiner and it will make glass for you. So as I said, most base building materials are going to be very easy for you to get your hands on. You can gather them up yourself, or there's a lot of them that you can just buy from the galactic trade or pilots that are on the space station. A couple of other good tips for base building is when you're building to use the free camera. This can sometimes make it a little easier to place down objects and to get a better view of what you're building. You can also use the free placement, which allows you to build objects pretty much anywhere you want. And using this, you can even build floating bases. I personally think that No Man's Sky base building is absolutely amazing. It's the best base building that I have ever experienced in a game. Whether you're building a sprawling city or just a small fishing hut, the building system in No Man's Sky is a ton of fun. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you guys got some good information out of this beginner series. Hit the like button if you want to help the video out, and as always, stay where you're at and I'll come where you're to. Later everyone.